When someone gets sent to prison, often they're not the only one who gets punished.
That love for your kids does not change just because you made a mistake and went away.
But funding for a program that keeps families together is in jeopardy in the Oregon legislature.
Without the program, you wouldn't really be able to, give your mom a hug.
And I know lobbyists get kind of a bad rap, but they actually help a lot of bills get passed, although they haven't done much of that this year, considering they're not even allowed in the lobby of the Capitol.
I think it's been extremely difficult for relationship building, which is the foundation of good legislating and foundation of good lobbying.
Also, we've got an update on BurritoGate. Turns out this story is a little beefier than we thought. Here's the story.
And it makes me want to eat a burrito for dinner. Maybe you're enjoying one now. If you are, send us a picture. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. I guess, if you want. Send me a picture of your burrito, sure. I'm Dan Haggerty. Hi, welcome to the story. All the ways to send us your burrito pictures at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. Email us at thestorykgw.com. Find me on Facebook or Instagram. And let's talk tonight during the show. This first topic, it just got me interested. I don't know why. But look, when a loved one dies, it's something that we all face throughout our life. There are a lot of decisions that have to be made, and they have to be made pretty quickly. And one of the big ones is what to do with that person's remains. So there's the traditional casket, burial, cemetery, gravestone, that sort of thing. Maybe there's the cremation route that people want to go, and you keep people in an urn, or you spread their ashes somewhere that was special to them or to the family, stuff like that. But in Oregon, there is this new, very intriguing option: human composting. Oregon Governor Kate Brown signed this new law yesterday legalizing human composting. They have they put a term to it. They call it natural organic reduction, but it is essentially human composting. They break that person's body down into compost, and then you can actually use it in your garden. It's been legal for a little while in Washington, a few years now. Earlier this year, actually, we visited a natural burial cemetery in Klickitat County where they do this.
We use a solution of wood chips, body wood chips, but then we also control the humidity inside the unit. We inoculate the system with a series of bacteria and protozoa and fungi. If somebody just wants to become a tree, then this is the best way to do it.
I mean, what a sentence right there. If you want to become a tree. Now, if you're wondering, man, that sounds really expensive. So this cemetery we talked to in Washington, they charge about $3,000 for this human composting, which in many cases is actually cheaper than a traditional funeral. It's also better for the environment, you could say. So if that's something you are concerned with, or if that's something that you want to be part of your legacy as a concern when you were alive, then maybe, hey, update the will. The two Oregon lawmakers who sponsored the bill said that they just had constituents, people who are interested in greener options for burial. And one of those lawmakers, Representative Pam Marsh, says they're moving along. They have plans right now in place soon to place human composting facilities in the state by 2022. How about that? Let's get to our big story, shall we? If you haven't been following Oregon politics or politics at Oregon's capital, it's been a little chaotic to say the least. Lawmakers, they're in session right now. COVID rules are still in place. The public can't go inside. On top of that, the state is trying to figure out how to do a lot of stuff like disperse federal COVID aid to help people stay in their homes. And we know a lot of major systemic issues have been on the table for them to tackle. Things like homelessness, of course, but also police reform and wildfire aid and climate change and apparently human composting. All that in mind, they've got just over a week left. And right now there are dozens of bills still yet to go that are essentially stuck somewhere in the legislative process. And if lawmakers can't find the time to push them through for a vote by the time things end, those bills may just die right there. And that goes even for bills that have zero opposition, that just need to be voted on to pass. Maggie Vespa shows us one example, and you might notice, if you're a fan of this show and you watch the story, you might notice that this one is backed by a familiar face.
Nikki, do you want a jacket? Here, Nikki, you got this stuff.
My shoes?
Probably, yeah.
I don't think society realizes that when they send a mother to prison, they send the entire family.
This is a rare inside look at kids visiting their moms in prison.
Someone got taller.
You got taller.
This documentary, shot before the pandemic, is called Mothering Inside. It profiles the Family Preservation Project, or FPP, at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, Oregon's only women's prison. The program, run by the YWCA, facilitates these regular family visits, which are set to resume this summer. FPP also helps moms stay in contact with their kids on the outside, and in some cases provides financial support to the people caring for those kids. Perhaps most importantly, during these visits, moms and kids can hug, cuddle, and have time alone. We're told all of that would be impossible without FPP.
I'm looking at my 3 kids, and I know that that program meant so much to me when I was inside. Walking on the Capitol grounds.
Vanessa Sherrod and her 3 kids are close now, thanks to the program.
It has to get done this year.
We spoke to Sherrod earlier this week, but you may remember her from a different time in her life.
Sorry, it gets hard to talk about this.
In February 2020, KGW aired a 3-part series called Life Inside. For nearly a year, we followed 3 women preparing to leave Coffee Creek. Sherrod was nearing the end of a roughly 5-year sentence for multiple counts of theft, and she had big plans for her life post-prison.
I went to be a part of advocacy program for the justice involved. I personally do not think prison should be the only option.
Sherrod was released around Christmas 2019. She hit the ground sprinting, studying social work at a local community college. This week, an update.
I just recently finished my associate's degree, and I just got certified as a PWS. It's a peer wellness specialist. Part of my job is with the YWCA of Greater Portland.
Meaning Sherrod is now paid to advocate for the YWCA's work. Right now, her primary focus is the Family Preservation Project and Senate Bill 720. If passed, it would maintain previous state funding levels for FPP at $325,000 a year for the next 7 years. It would also cover the costs of research on the long-term impacts of the program.
So much of what we're looking at interrupting are these intergenerational cycles of pain and suffering.
Jessica Katz founded FPP in 2010. She says the need is clear. Studies show children of incarcerated parents often suffer from psychological and emotional problems, trouble in school, and they're 6 times more likely to become incarcerated themselves. Katz argues FPP helps moms and kids combat those trends by giving them a calm, safe space to build healthy relationships. To continue that work, they need this bill and FPP's funding to get approved during this session. Katz is afraid lawmakers are too swamped with COVID aid, the housing emergency, wildfire relief, and basically all the big issues of the day. And it's putting their program on life support.
The funding that we receive from the state allows us to fully staff the program with the appropriate folks, on the team who are all master's level clinicians, because the work is complex and it's heavy.
That in mind, Sherrod is reaching out to state lawmakers in every way possible. Remember, the Capitol, which is currently under construction, is still closed to the public. That means pandemic restrictions have made advocating for FPP even harder.
Yeah, it's been all remote, office calls, Zoom calls, yeah.
That's you.
Sherrod is sending lawmakers this documentary, and she tells them how the program helped her kids.
Without the program, you wouldn't really be able to give your mom a hug.
Speaking of,
it helps the kids a lot.
They had a message for lawmakers.
How would you feel if someone wasn't fighting for you to be able to see your mom more often?
Sherrod hopes the legislature, amid the chaos of this session, is listening.
Can't take away being a mom. That'll never happen. That love for your kids does not change just because you made a mistake and went away.
Okay, so let's bring in Maggie Vespa and talk about this for just a minute, because there is another reason that this funding situation has become so dire, and it also has to do with Oregon politics.
Exactly. I mean, basically one word, walkout. Like, we all know that GOP lawmakers have walked out of sessions, sort of the last several sessions, or at least multiple times, and those sessions die on the spot when that happens because nobody can vote on anything. There aren't enough lawmakers there. FPP's funding has died multiple times, and the YWCA has been picking up the slack, but frankly, we're told they just can't do it anymore. So they need this funding to go through this time.
What are the chances? What are the chances they get the funding?
Okay, so there's really no opposition to the Family Preservation Project. We made the joke throughout the shoot that there's no anti-FPP lobby. This bill has 15 sponsors. We couldn't find anyone against it. And lawmakers do say if it does die just because of lack of time, they will try to get the funding for year one into this year's budget. But again, this bill would provide funding for the next 7 years, and it's basically because the YWCA and FPP don't want to have to keep doing this and coming back every year, and especially with these walkouts, they just want some security.
I'm also wondering, just personally for you, it had to be interesting to cover this story because Vanessa, the person who we talked to, is somebody who you have already known because you have covered her story in the past.
It was so cool. It was so cool to see her. I mean, really, we met her in in 2019. We aired the story in February 2020. So I've known her for years now. I've known her longer than anyone I think I've ever interviewed in my career, and she's doing so well. She's got a job. She just got her associate's degree. Her kids were so cool. They were so well-spoken. And a little bit of the backstory. I mean, we met her on the Life Inside series, and it's kind of weird for me to say this. It feels a little weird, but a couple weeks ago, that series won an Emmy for Best Continuing Coverage, and I called Vanessa to tell her that. And I reached out to all three women just to say thank you for being so brave and so genuine. And Vanessa basically said, that's so great. We're so excited for you, but I need your help. We need to talk about the work that I'm doing now, and we want to shed some light on this. So that's how this story actually came to be. And that's why we're here talking about FPP.
She's on a mission.
You don't say no to Vanessa. I was told that multiple times on the shoot. And kind of to that point, one last point, we are going to do updates on all three women in that series tomorrow here on The Story.
Got it. Maggie, Vespa, thank you.
Sure.
And if you are as interested in the work that they are doing as we are asking you to consider donating to the YWCA's Family Preservation Project as part of our Hey Help campaign. You just open the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to a link to donate. You can also go to kgw.com/heyhelp if you don't have that function on your phone. But once you get there, you can click on a drop-down menu and select Family Preservation Project. And we are calling this a micro donation drive. We've been saying that every day when we plug this. We want you to know that it doesn't have to be a big amount of money. You can give a small amount every cent really helps these projects to succeed. But let's go back just for a second to the bill for the Family Preservation Project funding, that bill. Some people think that it would have a better shot if the Capitol wasn't closed to the public, more specifically closed to lobbyists. In fact, that goes for a lot of bills right now. And I'm curious as we bring that up, do you know exactly what it is a lobbyist does? You know, before I got into the news business, I used to think that they were the one standing opposite the angel on the shoulders of politicians, whispering things like, cigarettes are actually good for you. We should advertise to kids. And while I'm sure that some of them actually do say that, the job is a whole lot more complex. One of our political experts, Rebecca Tweed, described it like this.
A lobbyist is essentially an advocate, right? A topic or a concept considered advocate. And they're typically paid, but what they do is they advocate on behalf of a client or a company or an organization to better and more intimately explain the priorities of that entity to legislators, right? So for example, if there are legislative concepts on agricultural issues, you're going to have various ag groups that say, hey, this is how this would impact agriculture. This is how it would impact the dairy farmers. And they really are there to be an informational resource. You're right. I mean, lobbyists are kind of seen as this, behind closed doors, smoking cigars, well-paid entities that control the room. But really, they're just there to provide information and context for legislators who have thousands of bills and no way to really understand the impact of all of those without lobbyists.
Now, I personally find that to be very interesting, considering that for the last year, the Capitol has been closed and the lobbyists have been kept out of the lobby. You see, lobbyists, they talk to politicians the way that Aaron Sorkin writes. I'm sure you've seen like The West Wing, those types of shows. They grab the politicians in the hallway. They do some walking and talking down the hallways of the Capitol, and they form relationships and they influence bills. I recently talked to Senator and Minority Leader Fred Girod about this. And keep this in mind, Girod is a man who has been serving in Salem since the early 90s. He knows his way around this sort of stuff. And he said this to me during a discussion about reopening the building to the public.
I think that the building should be open. And what I miss is the people coming into my office and explaining things. believe it or not, the lobby plays an important role because they read the bills of several different directions. I might read it one way and they read it another way. And I need to be able to see that to clean up those bills. So I think it's having the building closed, I think, is very, very harmful to the process.
So, as the session nears its end, was it harmful? Well, it's kind of hard to tell. Perhaps we'll dig into that when the session is over and ask some people and see what the impacts really were. I mean, it's not like lobbyists have been completely cut off. They can use Zoom just like the rest of us, but of course it's not as effective, is it? But for anybody wondering what politics would be like without lobbyists, I think this past year is about as close as you'll get. All right, let's talk about the story we've all been waiting for, the update on BurritoGate. This is Shelby Houlihan, an Olympic runner who trains with Nike's Bowerman Track Club in Portland. She went to the Olympics in 2016. She was planning to go back this year until she failed her drug test. Now, she has been banned from the sport for the next 4 years. The thing is, Houlihan says she didn't take any illegal substances. No. What it was a burrito from a food cart in Beaverton.
In the following 5 days after being notified, I put together a food log of everything that I consumed the week of that December 15 test. We concluded that the most likely explanation was a burrito purchased and consumed approximately 10 hours before that drug test from an authentic Mexican food truck that happens to serve pig offal near my house in Beaverton, Oregon.
Okay, maybe you're confused. I was when I first heard that too, but apparently there are actually some studies that show some pork meat, specifically from the liver of uncastrated males, can trigger a false positive for a chemical called nandrolone. It's an anabolic steroid of testosterone, so it increases muscle mass, and it's banned in sports. Okay, so I guess the pork burrito is a possible culprit here, possibly to blame. And not so much, maybe. As if this story wasn't strange enough already, it turns out that she didn't even order a pork burrito. Houlihan's lawyers confirmed to the Wall Street Journal, it's insane. Her lawyers have confirmed to the Wall Street Journal the following quote. Actually, she ordered a carne asada burrito, not pork, the day before her drug test. They believe that Houlihan was either given the wrong order or a burrito that included pork, but they don't know for sure. Well, this cross-contamination explanation apparently wasn't good enough for the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is a real thing. They determined that Houlihan failed to prove that nandrolone came from a burrito.
New York is celebrating its 70% vaccination rate with a little 4th of July preview. Meanwhile, we're over here in Oregon with our measly 68%. I guess no fireworks for us, at least not yet. When the story continues.
Hey, I almost didn't make it back on camera. Don't start without me. I was checking emails and tweets, people using the hashtag #HeyDan. Let me know what you think about our coverage tonight. I always like to discuss it at the end of the show. And at the risk of beating a dead calculator, I must discuss New York. Reopening, reaching the metric of 70% of adults with at least one vaccination shot. Yeah, they actually put fireworks up in the skies. Stop spreading the germs. Now look, when I said the 70% metric was arbitrary, in my opinion, whether it be in Oregon or New York, I mean that. I don't believe it's something that we should use to determine if we open businesses. It's also certainly not something to be celebrated with bright explosions in the sky. Ooh, that one crackled. COVID's over now, right? I've done a commentary on this every night this week, so I'm going to keep this one short. Getting 70% of adults with at least one shot in their arm does not protect anyone who isn't vaccinated. It's really that simple. We try to make this more complex than it needs to be. People keep writing me in and saying, I'm not a doctor. You're correct. I should stick to journalism. I am. And that metrics and goals are important. So I agree. Here's a metric that doctors are pretty unified on. The number 2. The number of shots you need to be fully vaccinated, unless you get the J&J, but 2. 2 should be your number 1 metric. If you get vaccinated, right, your risk of getting sick drops to nearly 0. Your risk of getting really sick is astronomically low. And your risk of dying, it's almost too small to consider. Multiple studies from hospitals across the country have found that nearly 100% of their COVID patients right now are people who never got the vaccine. The people who are getting really sick, the people who are going to the hospital, the people who are dying are the people who did not get the shot. In Oregon, 60% of adults are fully vaccinated. Millions of people who can safely do anything they want without worrying about COVID. We could share a carne asada burrito laced with pig meat in a Hamosh pit in the ball pit at a Chuck E. Cheese, and COVID isn't on the list of concerns. So, let's open the state. And if you're not vaccinated, don't be surprised if you catch COVID, maybe while watching fireworks. With that said, why don't we count some vaccines? All right, we like to do that each and every night. According to the CDC, 2.41 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose of a vaccine. That works out to be a little more than 68% of the state's adult population. The governor says when we hit 70%, the state can fully reopen. Right now, we need about 60,000 more people to get vaccinated in order to hit that mark. In Washington, the state is reporting 4.12 million people with at least their first dose. That's a little more than 67% of the state's 16 and older population. That's the metric that Washington is using. They're also aiming for 70% of that age group, but the governor says they're going to reopen by the end of the month no matter what. Now, these numbers are for the residents of these states, but what about people who don't live here? People who come here to work, for instance, like migrant workers. I talked to Pat Dorse about how many cherry farm workers in the Gorge are getting vaccinated.
Okay, Pat Dorse joining us now. Pat, tell us what you know about getting people vaccinated who are coming in from out of state to work in the farms in Oregon. Cherry farms, for instance, are about to see a huge influx of people.
Right, Dan. Well, it's a very labor-intensive operation. One of the farms that I've been at recently brings in 1,200 workers, or they have that many on site when they're in full operation, which will be next week. So there are a number of farms like that in the area that are going to be bringing in folks. Some are coming from California, and they're working the harvest right there. And as a side note, the harvest there has gone longer than expected. So there's a little bit of stress in this area. Kind of will that delay those people coming up here in time? So you have folks from California. You also have workers coming in from Mexico that are on a visiting worker visa and able to work in the orchards and the farms. What I've been told is that the folks coming in from Mexico are eager to get the vaccine and do it right away. The folks from California maybe have already had a chance, and if they're not vaccinated by the time they get here, it's because they don't want to get vaccinated. One worker that I talked to in the fields today said, even though he has been vaccinated, that there are other workers that he knows do not want to get vaccinated because they're worried about the side effects. They're worried that they will get sick and then they will not be able to work, and that they're kind of tight on their economics, and so they want to be able to be in the fields every single day and making the money. So those are kind of the two things going on. The folks coming up from California maybe not that excited about being vaccinated. The farm that I was at said about 40% of their workers are, but 60% are not. The people coming in from Mexico, definitely eager. And the folks that live in this general area that are also working in the orchards and have not been vaccinated yet, there's a reason for that. And it's not because the vaccine is not available. It's because they don't want it.
Is there any type of outreach efforts that are being done to try and ease some of those concerns of people who might be reluctant to get the vaccine?
Well, there's a number of different things. One is there's great availability. I'm in the parking lot where FEMA has set up a vaccination clinic. They're here every Tuesday through Sunday from noon till 6 p.m. Anybody can come in, no questions asked, no charge, of course. You can get Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. There's also a local federally recognized health organization called One Community Health, which has had vaccination events themselves in smaller clinics. They've also done outreach. They've gone to Celilo, for example, along the Columbia River 3 or 4 times, they were telling me, to help the tribal community there get vaccinated. So there is quite a bit of outreach going on. And again, what I'm hearing is that the people who have not gotten the shot yet, it's not because it's not available, it's because they're still hesitant.
Right. All right. Good stuff as always, Pat. Thank you.
You bet.
Now, let me know what you're thinking. Use those phones of yours. Type in some comments, some questions. Use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Send me an email to story@kgw.com. I always like to read a few at the end of the show. That's next. So I don't have a lot of time. I'm probably going to talk too long. My producers are going to get mad, but here we go. I asked for people to send some pictures of their burritos for dinner at the beginning of the show. Nobody was eating a burrito, but Dean did send me a picture of a Ziploc bag filled with hot dogs. So thanks, Dean. The effort counts. And then, oh boy, what else we got here? Some lobbyist lore. How about this? Luis writes this in. Lobbyist lore is that when the White House was being renovated during Ulysses S. Grant's term, he stayed at the Willard Hotel and, wait for it, met with advocates in the hotel lobby, hence lobbyists. Huh? I like that. Very nice. Last but not least. I know I'm running out of time. I'm going to go with this really quick. James writing in. I said, change your will if you want to do this compost burial thing. He said, don't put it in your will, man. That's like the thing they check way after you've been buried. Instead, make sure you tell people closest to you what your plans will be. A little morbid end of the show, but I think it's important. Something we all got to consider at some point. Thanks for being with us. That's the story. See you tomorrow.